So at their home, Nick's grandmother was still alive, because Nick's dad was the last born. And in their family, they had only remained two sons, the eldest son and the youngest son. So she was very, very old, but she used to scream a lot and like communicating with unknown people who are not seen. He will scream at the top of her voice. She was very, very old, but one could think it is the voice of a person in a youthful age. So now that our house was incomplete, it was not a big house. I used to sleep in one of the rooms, which was in the grandmother's house. The house had 2 rooms, so I used to sleep what used to be the living room. And I wasn't alone. I used to sleep with Nick's sister, Betty. But the grandmother used to scream alone and have conversations with unknown. And the other thing, day and night, she was in torment of bedbugs. In fact, this was the first time that I was able to see how bedbugs look like. I used to hear of bedbugs, but this was the first time I saw bedbugs. And she lived in torment of them. She was very, very old. Even moving was just a problem. So Nick's mother was the one who used to take care of her, even bathing her. It was Nick's mother. But Nick's dad had unconditional love for her own mother. Sometimes he used to just come, sit with her, eat with her, bring her all the sweet foods. He loved her mother so much. So now that I had to stay there at their homestead, this is the time that I was able to know some information. So during this stay, I was observing and also gaining more information. The first thing, at first I thought that they were Islam, because Nick's names are Nicholas Lisuza Issa. His father's name is Samson Kisiebo Issa. So I thought that they were Islam, but they were not Islam. So I was wondering, where did this name Issa come from? Because it belongs to the Islamic religion. And I heard again that before he had a Luya name. But on the way, he came to change his name to Isa, because his own brother has both Luya names. And the other thing, where they are living, it is not their original homeland. Their original homeland is in Maragoli, but they were chased from their original homeland. And so when they were chased, the late grandfather to Nick bought that piece of land where they are living currently. So it wasn't their original homeland. So things were just coming to light. Things were just coming to light. But as much as they were coming to light, I could hear them. But it was like normal information to me. It never clicked my mind that these were alarms that should enable me flee early. So I stayed at their homestead. And all this time, we used to operate one kitchen. I wasn't cooking on my own alone. Even when Nick was able to ferry everything that we had in Mombasa through the help of his own father, because he used his double cabin to help him ferry everything from Mombasa. But not everything was ferried, because the fridge never came. And when I asked Nick about it, he said that no space was found to carry that fridge, because the double cabin had no enough space, and this belonged to his own father, and it was his own father together with his own brother that helped him to ferry everything from Mombasa. The other thing is that most of the time Nick's dad used to spend in Mombasa. Most of the time he used to spend his time in Mombasa. And you will always be told he has gone to work. He has gone to work. He has a contract with Kenol Kobil Company. Most of his time it was just in Mombasa, in Mombasa, in Mombasa. The other information that I learned about the family again, it was a family full of poverty. And even Nick's dad, although he is very rich, he never completed schooling. But he is very, very rich. One time I tried to inquire from Nick, and all he said that there is a time that his own dad borrowed some amount of cash, I don't know from whom. That is the amount that enabled him to prosper. He is very rich, and he has the love for cars. So I was just trying to connect sometimes in my own mind. Where did this richness come from? How did it happen? Sometimes I used to ask, this name Isa, how did he change to Isa and he is not Islam? So I was asking myself so many questions. Why were they chased from their own original home in Maragoli? And the other thing that I learned is that Nick's mom was a second wife. His dad had a first wife, but this wife, they separated. He abandoned him and left after some years of marriage. So there were so many things coming up to life, and I was just asking myself, as much as I was asking myself, I was just there staying, like this information that I was constantly getting didn't stick to my mind, to my soul, that there is something fishy that is within this homestead and these people. So I stayed. So even when Nick ferried our goods, even our utensils that we used to cook when we were living outside from their homestead, they refused that I am not allowed to cook on my own until the day that my mother-in-law will give me my cooking place. So I remember I used to communicate with my own mother, and I asked her about it. It bothered her so much, because she said that is not supposed to happen. You are supposed to live your life. You are supposed to be cooking even on your own. So they refused. So when Nick finally came to their home place, because many times they were wishing that we should not be staying outside but staying in the homestead. So at first everything was smooth, but it reached a point everything started becoming bad. They were not saying it, but you could feel that there was an enmity that was growing. Like they're just forcing to relate to you, but they don't want you near. In fact, the eldest sister, Betty, to Nick, she has an evil heart. Enmity was just growing. Sometimes you will even find that food was being hidden. The other thing was that one day an argument erupted. And when this argument erupted, Nick defended me. So when Nick defended me, it never pleased his own mother. So she started crying, talking all the bad, saying that we are bad. So she was crying, but it never bothered me, because the truth remains the truth. So this argument, I decided that I will be cooking on my own in my house. During the time of this argument, Nick's dad was not around. He was in Mombasa. So I started cooking on my own in my house together with Nick. We had no food. It was just survival. But I decided that I will be cooking on my own. So I cooked for some days. And during the weekend, Nick's dad came. So when he came, he held a meeting. And he asked everyone to express and say what happened. So everyone talked. But in the end, he brushed everything off and said again that I am not supposed to cook in my house until when I have been given my own fireplace. And at this point, he opened and said that he had the first wife, and this first wife, as much as Nick's dad had the eldest brother, Pius. So this wife to Samson, Nick's dad, this first wife, she wanted they cook on their own, yet Pius, the eldest son, has not been given his own fireplace. So that was the reason that made the first wife go and leave him. So I just wondered, this was not a valid reason. Just cooking, no. So that remained an information that was adding to my store of information. Mostly I was just observing and hearing from even other people. So Nick stayed jobless and I am jobless. So when Nick's dad had that, even when Nick's dad had that, even food was being hidden from us, he promised that instead of us both just being at home, he's going to open a business for us, an M-Pesa business, so that with that M-Pesa at least we'll be able to get money for the basics. So he was able to do that. But Nick refused to operate the M-Pesa business. So I was the one who had to operate the M-Pesa business. Now from their point at home to town, it is a long distance. They are Ebuchira Interior in Kakamega. Just from their home place to the main road where you could be able to get a public service vehicle. It is a rough road and it is 1 kilometer. And then from the main road to Kakamega town where I was supposed to operate the business. At that time, the fare was 50 bob with public service vehicle. But if you use a motorbike, some will charge 50, but some will charge more. So at that time, Lindsay, our firstborn daughter, she was 2 years. So they proposed that I should be leaving her under the care of Betty and grandmother. So I left her, I think, for some days. But when I was returning from job in the evening, I used to monitor so many things just with my eyes. And one day I remember I came and found Lindsay had peed on her clothes. And when you look at the pee, it is something that even if you just point the cloth in the pit latrine, that pee will just drop off. But it had been wrapped just in wait for me. And more so, Nick came and opened up and said that the way the child is being handled, it doesn't make him happy. And he requested me to just be going with Lindsay to work. So I told him I will be going with her. Now that it was the start and the budget fare was just 50 bob to town, meaning that I will have to walk the 1 kilometer to the main road and then use the 50 bob to town. And now that I had Lindsay, and now that she was little, I was supposed even to carry some extra clothing for her, even porridge. So during this time, I just started well. I remember I was placed in the care of Ruth Adema. She was the one that taught me how to operate M-Pesa, because she was operating an M-Pesa, but this M-Pesa belonged to Nick's dad, but it was under the care of Baraka Stores. So I operated the M-Pesa opposite Rudy Kelly's shop in Kakamega town. Walking that distance from their home to and fro wasn't that easy. Remember, you have a child that you are carrying. You have luggages that you are carrying. And at the end, the amount that was coming from M-Pesa, the commission, it wasn't that much, because this is the same amount that you have to budget for the basics. This is the same amount that is supposed to cater for your fare and lunch. So ilikuwa tu kuvumilia na kusonga. But now that Nick was jobless, his situation worsened. With each passing day, his situation worsened. Sometimes you will wake up, prepare yourself, want to go to town. He will follow you to town. He will also get into the car, and you are the one to pay that amount of fare. Know that this one is extra budget that you had not planned for. Even when in town, if he has no money for lunch, he will come and borrow. Sometimes he will say, I will refund, but he fails to refund. Remember, this is extra budget. Or sometimes you will get the family members. Some will ask you for something. you can't be able to deny them, because in all, this money belonged to their dad. So it was like it is a business that is meant to support you, but it was like a slavery job, a slavery business. So Nick worsened and worsened. Mostly he will wake up very early in the morning, mostly 6, and just disappear, and then return back later. Later I learned that there is a point near the main road, around some bushes, that was the place where he frequented much, together with some other boys, to go there and smoke bang, and sometimes even in town. I will spot him eating miraa. The other funny thing is that Pius, the eldest brother to Samson, Nick's dad, so he is an uncle to Nick, him too choose miraa, and sometimes he will take Nick as company, and both they will chew miraa. So life, as much as I thought that I will be able to develop, I will be able to be productive, I felt that I was stagnant. It was unbearable for me. But as much as it became unbearable for me, I used to give myself hope. Although sometimes I just felt that I had no strength at all. So it reached a point that it was just conflicts between Nick and I. There was no agreement. There was no argument. There was no that husband love, wife relationship. So I was there in the homestead of them. But it's like now everybody is turning away from you. It's like you are the enemy of these people. Even your own person that you look that he will protect you, now he is turning away from you, never listening to you, your comments or advices. You have to obey everything that is being said, because him, mostly he used to obey everything that his father said. I remember one time I was supposed to go home, and I wanted to go, and I told Nick that I was going. Then later Nick came and told me that he has talked to his own father, but he has said that there's no permission. So I was wondering and asking him, am I supposed to get permission from Nick's dad? Am I married to Nick's dad, so that I may be able even to travel to our home? I must get permission from him. So I was wondering, what kind of life is this? What illiteracy is this? But I just kept quiet. I remember I shared this with my mother again, but it surprised her. She even asked and said, Why and what permission does he have over you? You are not married to him. He isn't supposed to dictate you. There should be that respect and boundary. So, sometimes when you operate a business, you are supposed mostly to open around 8 and then close around 5:30 to 6, but you will find you are heading to work around 10, reaching there even 11. Why? Because at your house, at your own life, you have to do some ABCs. You have to wash, you have to clean the house, and there Nick's mom still is waiting for you to do ABCs for her, of which it is impossible. So I was feeling drained, no freedom, like in just total slavery. So I wanted my own freedom, to cook on my own, to have my own, to know how I am planning myself, but they didn't allow that. Sometimes I will go to work, and in the evening, because of A, B, and C's, even sometimes the weather condition, because of rain, I may arrive home late. So still when I arrive home late, it becomes an issue. You will find, you just read from the faces, they are not happy, wamekasirika. And again, hiyo haijatosha. In our own house, you hear again Nick start attacking you about the time of coming home. And some things you can't avoid them. It was a struggle for me. I felt worn out, like you are struggling for nothing, and you are just alone bearing that burden. They have many pieces of land. They do farming. Sometimes they want you to go and operate in the farm, or they want you that now that they have people, they have employed workers on the farm, they want you to remain behind, prepare the tea for these people, and sometimes take to the shamba. Then you come and go to work. How can this happen? So I used to refuse these things. So I became a bad girl. I became an evil girl. I became their enemy. Like a person they never wanted, but yet they are forcing themselves on me. So that is how I survived. And in the end, the best enemy to me became Nick himself. He sided with the parents more. He never wanted to hear from me. He said that I was arrogant, I was rude. So every suffering that I was going through, I was meant to keep quiet, not to say and express myself. That everything that the parents said they did, I should just swallow. That was not for me, because it was just unbearable. So there with Ruth Adema, opposite Rudy Kelly's. We were operating both M-Pesa line, but at one station. So we had customers. And I remember up on the next building, there was a cyber. And a group of youth boys used to operate that cyber. And I remember we had a frequent customer named Gideon Manyasi. He loved betting a lot. He used to bet, to deposit money just for betting. And also, sometimes he used to come with Blue Line Safaris Nissan, public Nissan vehicle. So we got used to him so much. But at that time, the life that they had, they were boys that loved partying, the good life. We could see, we could read with their movements. They were making even banners. So it reached a point whereby the place that we were operating from, it had a case. The owner was demanding for that shop. He wanted to operate it herself. So we had to move, we had to shift. So I separated from Ruth Adema. And when I separated, I shifted near the market building in town. So there I started operating on my own now, the M-Pesa shop, with those green kiosks that they were donating to people, the county government green shops, kiosks. That was where I started operating. At first, Nick's dad paid the rent for that kiosk because they demanded 3,000. So I started operating there an M-Pesa shop. But while operating there in the M-Pesa shop, I didn't just operate the M-Pesa shop, but my mind expounded. And slowly by slowly, I could bring more other things, mali things, so that I was able to sell. But still there, now that I knew how to plait, I was among salons. And there was the Mercy salon. So sometimes when she was much busy, I will get even to plait ahead, especially the school lines. So that is how I survived. But with the M-Pesa business, I totally had no hope. Because now that the enmity was just big with Nick, he became like wild and wild. He used to demand money. And the worst thing, I will leave, or even sometimes I will reach town, open the business, but I will see him appear, demanding for money. And when he demanded for this money, remember he has no job. He just says he will return. So, this M-Pesa money the M-Pesa business. It was of no benefit because the same place that we had located, it wasn't that busy. You end month, you have a commission of 2,000. Now these 2,000, you have to budget for the basic. There is the fare issue, and remember, just 50 bob from main road to town, and then evening, that is 100 a day. When you multiply by a month, it is past the commission. So meaning that you'll end up using the fare money, because the mali goods at times you will sell, at times you won't sell. So I wasn't able to fight anymore, because I remember one day Nick came and he wanted money, and I said I don't have money. I said that because there was some debt that he had not paid. And sometimes you will find that even Nick's dad, he will be in need of some cash, and he will call and say, deposit for me this money, or he will send, especially Timothy. They take some cash and then they return later. So this is the kind of business that I was operating. So I decided that I won't fight anyone. They'll just do what they have to do. If it eventually fails, that's it. So I remember there was one day Nick came and he wanted some cash, and I said I don't have. He became furious, and I remember he even confessed that even in the business that I am running, even just there seated in town, nothing will stop him from beating me. So I had no peace. I just started regretting. And at home, I remember one day again, he wanted the cash, and I told him I don't have. And I remember he opened his mouth and said to me, this money belongs to my father, and he is the son, and he can use the money wherever he wants and what he wants to do with it. I have no right to deny him use of that cash. So this just became my end. He said whenever he wants, let him just take. Whether he returns, whether he fails to return, let him just take. In the end, let it perish, and I become free, and I be able to do my own. So this time again, my mother used to come to Kakamega to get their salaries. So one day she came and she visited me. I talked to her and I explained to her I want to focus on the Mali sale of goods. And I remember that day my mother gave me 20,000 shillings and said, with this money, just use it to expand your business. Let it help you. And I said, thank you. I was very, very happy. I was very, very, very happy. So this money, I remember it was early 2017 or late 2016, around that time. The first thing that I did with that money, I had no Bible. I went to Maisha Mart bookshop in Kakamega. I bought a Bible. This is the same Bible that I have till today, and it is the same Bible that I have used in writing the judgment book and the book of life. And it is the same Bible that God, the hand of the Lord, has been opening, giving me instruction, giving me the lead, giving me the revelations. It is in tatters, it is worn out. Since that time, I have never bought any other Bible. And during Sundays, I sometimes used to go to church, Catholic church. But it reached a point I said I won't be going to church. Instead of staying home at their home place with all the arguments, with no peace, let me just be going to town and open the business. So I was going to town opening the business, but against my will. I wished to stay and go to church, but it was against my will opening work on Sundays, because it had become a fight. Now, Nick's mother, the church that she worships are the uniformed churches. She is a member of Divine Church. And one thing, when Lindsay was born, when I first visited them for them to see their firstborn grandchild, they insisted that the child should be prayed for. So, during the stay, because I stayed some few days, they said that they will bring their church so that they pray for her. What happened during that day? When the church members came, I was just used to Catholic. So this other type of churches, I didn't know what they do much. So when they came on this day, I remember Nick's mom came and said, you won't go before them when you have your normal dress. You have to cover your head and you have to wear uniform. So mimi nilivaa tu, sikuichukulia ati maybe inaweza kuwa na, yani nilivaa tu ile nachukulia tu hii ni nguo ya kawaida, wacha nivae. So that day she was the one who covered my head with a cloth, and she gave me one of the uniforms to wear. I don't know if it belonged to her or who, I don't know. I just wore that uniform. So since that day, they were asking me that I am supposed, as the wife of that homestead, I am supposed to go to that church. There has no point of having two different churches, that I am going to Catholic and yet them they are going to Divine. That I am supposed to be a member of Divine Church because it is the church of the homestead. So I never agreed to this thing. I never agreed. At first nilikuwa nabeba kiburi naenda Catholic. Naamka mapema naenda Catholic. So I used to go to Catholic, and Nick used to keep silent. But when the parents saw that I am not joining the Divine Church, so they started attacking me through Nick. So it reached a point Nick now started to be against I going to Catholic Church or another church. So he was saying that I am supposed to join the Church of the Homestead, that I should just follow what they are telling me. And when time comes that maybe we are supposed to move and shift from home, is when I will be able to be free and worship in the church that I wanted. But I still refused. And when I refused, now I decided that instead of I staying home, because before I was staying just home and then going to church, again it became an issue that I don't go to church. So they thought that they had cornered me. And I had no option, I had no solution but to go to Divine Church. But I still refused. So because of that, I chose that on Sundays I won't be going to church, to avoid many issues. So I used even on Sundays to just go and open business. And I remember at that time my sister Lynette was living in a ginger. And two, she had an M-Pesa. So I used to pass sometimes at my sister's place, take her M-Pesa, and I go to town with both of them. So I operate both. So during this time that my mother gave me the 20,000 shillings. So this same week on a Sunday, I had woken up well, prepared myself, and was ready to go to town. There was a man in the neighborhood. He was called Mudogo. Mostly he was the one who used to ferry me to town using the motorbike. So he came at Nick's homestead. Because at this time there was an old tractor that Nick's dad had renewed so that Nick could operate that tractor and gain something. So Mdogo had been sent to pick, it was a rope, so that he could take to them. And when he came, I decided to use the motorbike so that it ferries me to town. So as we were leaving, Nick's mother, in the divine uniform, said that she is also using the motorbike. And Nick's mother insisted that we are sitting on the same motorbike. I looked at Mdogo and he was against this because he was somehow old. So she insisted and she insisted. So Mdogo had to accept. So we sat in the same motorbike. And I was heading to town. And she was heading in the same direction for an outside fellowship. So the 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 road isn't that levelized. There are some holes to, there are some potholes, there are some small, let me say what? Let me say some small, like small mountains. So we reached a point whereby the load was heavy for Mdogo. And Nick's mom had to get off the motorbike so that Mdogo gets past that place, and then we continue with the journey. So on reaching the tarmac road, I just don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Mdogo had just entered this tarmac road. I don't know what blinded him, I just don't know. But on entering the main tarmac road, it is a highway, the Mumias to Kakamega road. He saw that there was a car coming and it was speeding. It's either he moves back or this car will hit us. So the option that Mdogo did, he decided to move backwards off the tarmac road. So as he was moving backwards, I just don't know what happened, but we all fell down. So it was Mdogo, Lindsay, my daughter, I, and Nick's mother. We all fell down. And the funny thing, when people came to help us, no one else was injured except me. My left leg at the knee point was bleeding furiously. Because when we fell down, my knee was pressed on the side mirror. And these mirrors broke and cut my skin at the knee. Even some pieces were able to enter into my skin. So I was bleeding furiously. And I remember in seconds, it's like I was just in another world. It was like a tap of blood flowing. I was strengthless. I was seeing my own things. I was unable to stand on my own. I had to be supported. So I was rushed to a clinic in Center where I was attended to. They had to remove the small mirrors that had entered. They nursed the wounds. Till today the scars remain on my knee. Na nikashonwa. So the money that my mother had given me, this money ended up in treating this leg. And because I was operating an M-Pesa, I couldn't stay that long at home without operating that M-Pesa line, because failure, that line will be terminated. So I had to just stay a few days and then go back to work. So the money that my mother had given me, just a large amount of it ended up nursing and catering for my fare, because now I could not walk. The motorbike had to pick me from home to town, and now this was 100 shillings in the morning, in the evening 100 shillings. And the other funny thing is, before even we had this accident, Nick's dad never wanted me to use a motorbike. I remember one day he said that his homestead is not for motorbikes. He doesn't want motorbikes in his homestead. Now I was asking, this is the best and affordable that can help me. What will I do? Because the 1 kilometer to their home, it is burdensome. So he never wanted me to use the motorbike. And Nick always said that I should obey his dad. So these were part of the things that I used to ask God, why? Why? It was like a dictatorship. Because to me, I felt that he was intruding much. And the only person that would protect me was Nick. But there he was lost. He couldn't. Always following what his father said, obeying. So, I had that accident. But one thing, when I told my mother about the accident, the only reply that she gave me, she asked me, is Sunday a day of opening the business or going to church? Because of the accident, Mdogo no longer was the one who was to carry me to and from town. Nick himself connected me to his own friend, who also does the motorbike business, Geoffrey. So he recommended that Geoffrey be the one ferrying me to and from town. So Geoffrey started doing it. I became used to him. I became a customer and he became my customer. Even sometimes when I had no money, I knew that he would ferry me and I will pay him later. So each day he will come in the morning, in the evening, return me back home. And another thing that I had forgotten, in the stay at Nick's homestead, I learned that the place where our house had been built had been established, because Nick's dad built this house. It had 3 rooms plus a veranda. So one of the rooms on the left hand side belonged to Timothy, but these other rooms, the 2 rooms and the veranda, belonged to us. So I learned that this house, the same place that it had been established before, it belonged to the late grandmother and grandfather. that their house had been established on the same grounds, but it was demolished. So life in that homestead was complicated. As much as you try to understand, as much as you are trying to figure out, as much as I was trying to come to agreement with everything that I should accept, but I found it very hard. I found it very hard. I was not happy with my stay with Nick. I was not happy. And more so, there was no formal introduction between the parents. They had never come to our place, and I had never had that formal meeting that they have come to pay the dowry. So it was like just a come stay. You're not sure if it is a marriage or tomorrow everything has vanished in thin air. So Geoffrey became my good customer, and Nick continued with the behavior. As much as I was struggling, he always, sometimes, I am going to town, he will also sit and go to town. And remember, he's going to town to do nothing. He has been carried on a motorbike. It doesn't belong to us. Geoffrey has to be paid. Nick will reach town and just alight. Sometimes he will again come asking for money for lunch. Sometimes you will hear someone say to you that he has spotted him somewhere, he's eating miraa. Then you wonder, where is this money coming from? It's like he was taking some cash from me, going to buy those miraa, going to take those bang. So that is the life that I had. I was just fed up, completely fed up. I had no hope. I remember one day, Lynette had called me, and she said to me that I should pass by a tailor who always makes her clothing. That she had a fabric and it had been cut and remained. So the remnant of that fabric they use to make me a dress. So I remember this day that I went to this tailor. I was in the company of Nick, and it was Geoffrey who carried us to that place. So I went in, they took my measurement, and I headed back to work. So the relationship that I had with Geoffrey, I used to ask him much. I wanted to know more of him. And he gave me a testimony that before he was a bad boy. He used even to smoke bang. But it reached a point that he had his turning point. But he once said something to me. He said that the life that you have is complicated. He told me that. The life that you have is complicated. The ground that you are, you need to pray a lot. He told me that. And when he told me that, I somehow opened up to him and explained everything. And he said, you must pray a lot. Because even sometimes you don't know. You may be going to town and back at home, they do their own things. And another thing I have remembered that sometimes I will go to town and I will lock my door. But in the evening, I will find like the door somehow had been opened, because the way that I locked the door, it wasn't the same way that the 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 way that I had pressed that padlock. The face that I had wasn't the face that I was getting in the evening. And sometimes I would ask Nick if he was the one who came during midday. And he said he was not the one. So I was just wondering, when I am present, no one is visiting, no one is opening the house. But while I'm away, who comes and opens this house? So it reached a point. Now arguments started. I was being told that no longer should I be seen in the company of Geoffrey. And more so, they don't want any motorbike in their homestead. And Nick even questioned me that, what do I always talk with Geoffrey? So to them, it was like I was having a relationship with Geoffrey. And that was what stuck into their mind, even to Nick's parents. So I was asking Nick, how do you want me to operate? At least he is someone, my customer. Even when I don't have money, I know I can count on him. So this brought an argument that even again we had another meeting with Nick's dad. And in that meeting, the way Nick's dad was talking, he was siding with his son. That I should stop using Geoffrey's motorbike, and they don't want to see any motorbike in their homestead. And Nick, in that meeting, in front of their dad, he opened his mouth and said that I have been warned, and if I don't listen, and if I am found in the company of Geoffrey, him carrying me on the motorbike, he swore in front of his dad during this meeting that he himself will cut me into pieces using a panga. And his dad kept quiet. And more so, Nick added that wherever he finds Geoffrey, even along the road, and he has his dad's car driving, he will intentionally knock Geoffrey. And before this meeting happened, I had opened up to my sister Lynette. And one day in the morning, while still at their homestead, Lynette visited while Nick's dad was present. We had this meeting. He was asking why everything is that way. But even during this meeting, Nick was rude and arrogant. He never wanted to listen. So I had stretched to my elastic limit, and I was tearing apart. It was just enough for me. It was enough for me. So one day I came back home. And when I came back home, we had just eaten supper. That evening I had gone back to sleep. And an argument started again with Nick. So an argument started with Nick, and this night he beat me. And not just beating me, he locked the door and put the key in his pockets and said that I should not cry and I should not scream. And if I do anything stupid, he's going to beat me more and no one will help me. So the only thing that I remembered during this time and kept quiet, I remembered my mother, an event that happened to her. My father one time also locked the door and he pierced my mother a knife. My aunt was present and concept her. She tried so much so that will not happen, but it was too late because he locked the door and did the piercing to my mother. So when Nick locked that door, the only thing I remembered the event that happened to my mother. So I just kept quiet. I never talked much. But ilikuwa imenitosha. Nilikuwa nimefika mwisho. Because there is still no hope with the business. It's like you have just become nil with nothing. How will you survive? And another thing, Lindsay at that time used to love sleeping with her grandmother. And I noted to some extent that my relationship with my own daughter was not like before. Like sometimes she would reject me, not wanting me even to come close to her. Again, another event that happened, Nick's grandmother, the one who used to scream, she died. And she was buried. But the funny thing, just after her burial, in the house that I used to live with Nick, suddenly we suffered the attack of bed bugs. We never used to sleep at night. And her gravesite was just in front of our house, just after the veranda was the gravesite of her grandmother. And remember too, her grandfather, when he died, this was the same land that he was buried. And they normally bury the wife beside the husband. So life was unbearable. So Lustina died, Nick's grandmother. But she died in bad torment. Bad torment. And people used to talk of how she was evil. She was wicked. Even the grandchildren, they used to talk and confess of what she used to do. So after her burial, after I think some 40 days, there's this thing that the Luyas normally do, the makumbusho. So this makumbusho was done and I was in the homestead. So while this makumbusho was done, I met Nick's dad in their own house in the living room, and he asked me if I had ever eaten that meat of makumbusho, because they normally slaughter a bull at the gravesite. And I told him I have never. And he said if I have never eaten that meat, I should not attempt to eat it. And I said okay. So this night, many people were around the homestead, visitors. Even my house was in use. But Nick brought a friend, a fellow drug addict. Even when you see him, you just get scared. So I have prepared the house for the visitors. But he has come with this friend of his, and they are eating mira and having their fun. So I tried to question him about it, but I did a mistake. I offended him and he became angry. So I just left him and went to the kitchen to aid cooking. So when the food was ready, it was around midnight. People had to eat. And I decided now that I should go and sleep. So while sleeping, from nowhere, Nick came to me while I was sleeping, very furious. And he was saying all the bad, all the evil. And he was saying that he is tired with me. He is very tired with me. I am causing arguments between him and his own parents. I am separating him with his parents. He said many bad things, and I remember Timothy, his brother, was again present. And he said that his own dad married the first wife. But after 10 years, this wife went away. So if it happens again, it won't be a sad news. It is just okay. So he wanted to beat me while I was sleeping. But Timothy is the one who prevented him and took him away. Another thing that happened while I was staying still in the homestead, I had 3 dreams that I never understood what the dreams meant. During my sleep, I was seeing Nick's dad in a house in the company of other unknown men. Like they were sitting in a round form. And they were engaging in some rituals, unknown rituals. This is the vision that I was seeing in a dream. Another dream, I saw that on my way to their homestead, there's usually a path, this rough road. On both sides, it's like it's forested, trees all over. You may walk along this road, but in fear, because it is just like forested, and it is a long path. And mostly you may find you are just alone. So on this road, it is the last road to their homestead. So along this way, I was able to see on a tree. At the top of the tree, I was able to see a leopard on that tree. And this leopard was just looking at me with fierce eyes. This was another dream that I had. And the last dream that I still had while in that homestead. I heard a voice saying to me, "This homestead, no. This homestead, no." And while this voice was talking to me, I saw Nick's mother. She was standing, and an old woman was sitting beside her on a chair, this small chair like stools, kitty moto. This old woman was sitting beside Nick's mom on a kitty moto. And then Nick's mom was saying that, "Let me continue eating chapatis in this homestead." That was what she was saying. And then this voice added and said to me, "Especially that car." So especially that car. Which car? The car that I was being shown was the double cabin that belonged to Nick's father. The white double cabin that belonged to Nick's father. At that time, he had two double cabins. There was a Nissan, and there was a tractor parking in the homestead. So I was being given the vision of the double cabin of Nick's father. It was white in color, and it was just parking the same place that it used to park. So that voice was telling this homestead, "No, hii boma hapana." So those are the dreams that I had. So during the time that Nick beat me, the next morning I woke up, did my course. I was very furious because even just telling their parents, it was of no use, because they will be happy about it. Because to them I was a rude person. I was arrogant. I never wanted to hear what they were saying. Another thing, this is the same time when I had brought Lindsay to them. This is the same time when Nick's mother was trying to tell me that now that I have a firstborn girl, Lindsay, that I am supposed to tie a thread around her waist so that it molds the waist. It doesn't appear like the shape of the waist of the Kikuyus. So I was just wondering, I've never had this. And now that we are all 5 girls, and I noted that we don't have those bad waists. So I decided to ask my mother about it. And my mother said, "No, that is a lie. He never did that or did anything to our waists." So I knew that this was a lie. And I never accepted what Nick's mother told me. I was frustrated, and I just had come to my limit. I told Lynette managed also to talk to my mother. And then Lynette said that she called me and told me that she has explained everything to my mother. And my mother has said that kama imezidi, I should not stay there and I'm troubled. I should just go back home. So at least this gave me hope that I can leave and go back home. So that morning, after the night that Nick beat me, in the morning he was still arrogant. I remember I had gone to wash the utensils. I came back. He had washed his clothing. And about the issue of Nick washing his clothing. Nick he had reached a point that he could stay even days without taking a bath. And when you wash his clothing, it was like, I don't know, like a fight. His clothing are not to be washed every day. If you wash every day, he will say that you are destroying his clothing. So I had just reached a point that when I get his clothing among our other dirty clothing, that is the time that I will wash. But if the clothing are not there, I will not wash or look for them or ask for them. That's how I decided to just leave. So he had decided that he was washing his own clothes. So he decided himself to assemble them and wash. And now that he washed, I found that the whole veranda, it was just water. He had poured and filled it with water. So I just looked, I kept quiet and decided to mop that water. But it was my end. It had reached my end. I felt like I was bursting, the point of death. So I went to town. This evening I came back. When I came back, I came around, it was 6 o'clock. And I remember Nick asked me what means I had used to come back home. So I was asking him, will you monitor me about the means that I'll be using? So I saying that, in an instant, he woke up. And it was in our own house. And an argument started. Her mother came and she was around. And during this argument, still the way her mother talked, he was siding with Nick. So they never wanted me to answer. Nick never wanted me to answer, saying that I was being disrespectful to her mother. They never wanted to hear me speak. And my mother was proposing that I should not answer back. So Nick raised his hand and wanted to beat me. But her mother prevented. But during this time when Nick was looking at me furiously, there's something that I noted that was beyond. It was beyond. It was like the eyes of an animal that was looking at me. A wild animal that has grown furious. It wasn't the normal eyes of Nick. So I just kept quiet. And I said, I will never talk to anyone, but whatever I will decide, they will just hear of it. One day, they'll just see me go, as always, to town, expecting me to come back, but they will never see me. So that became my decision.